What up, everybody? BMF Season 4 concluded with Meech and Tina getting arrested after a fight broke out at Platinum Palace between Meech and Trell's bodyguard Kano that resulted in a brawl, with Kano getting cut in the neck by a bottle that Tina used to break over Trell's head before getting knocked to the ground and inadvertently cutting Kano. And this is obviously inspired by the events that took place at Club Chaos in the early 2000s that resulted in Big Meech getting charged with the murder of Wolf Jones. And even though there are clearly some differences between the two situations, now that B Mickey is dead and the real life person who B Mickey was based off, D Meeks, is still alive, I hope everyone now understands that everything in the show isn't going to go exactly how it went in real life, especially the Club Chaos story, not only for legal reasons, but because the case still remains unsolved. But from what I heard about that night, Meech and his crew had been partying for several days straight when they decided to go out to Club Chaos that night to party. But at this party, there was P. Diddy's longtime security guard, Wolf Jones, who was also a friend of the Flannery brothers in one of their distros. Terry talks about providing work for Wolf to move in his documentary preview, and also said that Wolf was like a brother. But when Wolf got to the club, he saw a girl that he was either dating or had previously dated in the VIP section dancing with Meech. And at that point, Wolf confronted the girl and started making a scene when Meech tried to step in and de-escalate the situation, only making things worse to where Wolf and the guy he was with were both thrown out of the club by security. But at that point, Meech was no longer feeling the energy in the club after the situation with Wolf, so him and his people decided to leave. But as they were leaving, a shootout took place in the parking lot, to where Wolf Jones and the guy he was with were both killed, and Meech was shot in the ass and ultimately charged with double murder. Then Meech getting interrogated was a scene within itself, keeping in mind that he had been partying for several days straight and ended up taking a piss in the corner of the interrogation room. And because he was shot in the ass, he couldn't sit down and just laid across the interrogation table while they questioned him. But ultimately, because Meech wasn't actually the shooter and the cops didn't have a very strong case, Meech was released on house arrest as he awaited trial. And when Meech was on house arrest is when the problems really started to escalate between Meech and Terry. First, with Meech being on house arrest, he was no longer able to take part in the drug operation, leaving Terry in control to do whatever he wanted to do. And at that point, Terry began taking the work and cutting it before giving it to Meech's people to sell. And of course, that was going to be a problem when people aren't getting as pure of work as they're used to and what they were promised and expecting. So because of that, Meech had to have J-Bo step up in his role as junior boss even more, sending him directly to the plug to pick up the work instead of going through Terry. Then there was another situation that broke out between Meech's crew and Terry and his crew while Meech was on house arrest at Terry's birthday party in what I believe was Las Vegas. Meech's people showed up to the party in free Big Meech t-shirts, which already pissed Terry off to begin with. Then at one point during the party, they put Meech on the big screen while he was still on house arrest to say a few words. And I'm not sure exactly what he said, but at that point is when the confrontation took place between Meech's crew and Terry's crew, where it was about to the point where guns were drawn. And it was around this time when Meech and Terry officially divided BMF in half, with Terry rebranding his crew as 263. So that's what I know of the real life events that took place as a result of Meech getting arrested for those murder charges and getting placed on house arrest. So now I want to talk about how we could potentially see this situation play out moving forward on the BMF series, whether it's in a season 5 or potential BMF spinoff. First off, with the real life situation at Club Chaos, Meech was the only person arrested as far as I know, but on the show, Tina was also arrested with Meech. And in real life, part of the reason why the case was so easy for Meech to beat is because he didn't test for gun residue. But in the show, there was no shooting that took place. Kano was cut with a bottle, and not only were Tina's fingerprints on the bottle, Kano's blood was on the bottle, as well as Meech's fingerprints when he took the bottle and threw it in the trash. So that's one big difference. It's going to make beating the case on the show a little more difficult than it was in real life. The situation also happened inside a club in front of several witnesses. Either though, because there was a brawl breaking out at the time, we can't say for sure how many people actually saw everything that was taking place. But we could assume that there will be some witnesses stepping up and saying that Meech had nothing to do with Kano's death. And Tina could potentially be Meech's saving grace with this whole situation if she steps up and eats the charges herself. Either though, because it was an accident, that might not be the best move to make, but in order to make sure that Meech walks on these charges, it might be something that she has to do. But with that said, the person who's going to make it real difficult for Meech will be Trell. Trell obviously wasn't too happy about his security guard getting killed, not to mention he already has bad blood with Meech, in addition to power and influence from his success in the music business. So he could potentially lie on Meech and say that it was Meech who killed Kano. And in addition to Trell potentially lying on Meech and saying that he did it, we also know that Detective Bryant and Agent Taylor are going to try to do whatever they can to make these charges stick. Most likely, once Bryant and Taylor realize that they don't have a case, they still won't drop the charges, and that will ultimately be how Meech will get on house arrest as he awaits trial, trying to keep him grounded as much as possible. But once Meech is on house arrest, stuck in Atlanta, not able to make any moves, T and Markeisha will most likely be moving out to LA so T can oversee the entire operation. Meech just found out at the end of episode 10 that T and Keisha already bought a house out in LA. So Meech figured out then that T's plan was to move to LA to be closer to Manuel and try to take over as the face of the organization. And when Meech told him not to do it, T said it was already done and hung up the phone on Meech. And because Keisha's moving out to LA with Terry and is always in Terry's ear talking against Meech, she'll use this as an opportunity to divide the brothers even more in order to have more influence over Terry. Keeping in mind what Keisha told Terry when they were on the phone talking about moving to LA and Terry mentioned getting out the game. Keisha told Terry that they have to not just keep up with everybody else in the game, but also everyone in Hollywood. So Terry's going to be trying to make as much money as possible to keep Keisha happy. And I believe that will ultimately result in Terry cutting the work similar to what happened in real life, using the whip method Meech and Terry learned from Pint in season 2, which will cause problems between the two brothers moving forward, ultimately with them splitting up and T rebranding his crew as 263. Keeping in mind that Meech and T going their separate ways was foreshadowed twice in the season finale, once by Meech and once by Terry. And there you have it. Leave your thoughts, theories, and predictions in the comments.